I was only 4 when my life was stolen in a crowded train station. My mom's hand slipped from mine for just a moment, and that moment changed everything. We were surrounded by people, the sound of train whistles and the smell of coffee from the small station cafe. I remember looking up at her, smiling, because we were going to meet my uncle that day. She smiled back and told me we'd get candy before the train arrived. I felt safe. I had no reason to think anything bad could happen. In less than a minute, that safety vanished. I felt a hand, strong, unfamiliar, wrap around mine. I looked up, and it wasn't my mother. A man I had never seen before was bending toward me, telling me to come with him. I didn't understand. I thought maybe my mother had asked him to help me. He led me away, weaving quickly through the crowd. I tried to look back, but the sea of people closed in between us. That was the day my childhood ended. 25 years later, after decades of believing I was forgotten, a single phone call and a DNA test gave my mother back the daughter she thought she had lost forever, and it gave me back the family I never knew I still had. The day had started like any other special outing with my mother. Her name was Karen Miller. She was 26 at the time, a young woman with a soft voice, quick smile, and a way of making even the smallest plans feel like an adventure. We didn't have much, but she worked hard, took care of me on her own, and always tried to make our moments together feel special. That morning, she had dressed me in my favorite yellow dress with the little white flowers on the hem. She tied my hair into 2 neat braids and said, I looked sunny. We were heading to the train station in our small Ohio town to meet my Uncle David, her older brother. He was visiting from another city, and she hadn't seen him in years. She was excited, I could tell, because she kept glancing at her watch and smiling to herself as we walked. She held my hand tightly in hers, swinging it gently with each step. The air was crisp, carrying that faint scent of wet pavement that lingers after a light morning rain. When we reached the station, it was alive with movement. People in coats hurried past, pulling rolling suitcases or clutching newspapers. A man in a conductor's uniform called out train numbers over the loudspeaker, his voice echoing through the high ceilings. The scent of fresh coffee and pastries drifted from the small cafe near the entrance. My eyes caught the bright colors of the candy stand beside the cafe, jars of lollipops lined up like little rainbows. I tugged on my mother's hand. "Mama, can I have one of those red lollipops?" She smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. "Of course, but hurry. We don't want to miss Uncle David's train." Those are the last words I remember her saying before everything changed. I can still feel the warmth of her hand as I let go to skip toward the candy stand. My feet made a quick patter against the tiled floor. The woman behind the counter leaned forward with a kind smile and asked what I'd like. I pointed to the lollipop jar, my heart light with the simple joy of knowing it would be mine in just a moment. That's when I felt it. A hand closing around mine, bigger, rougher, unfamiliar. I looked up, expecting to see my mother. Instead, a tall man with a shadowed face was leaning toward me. His voice was quiet but firm. "Come on, we have to go." I didn't understand. My first thought was that maybe Mama had sent him to help me. My second thought was confusion. Why weren't we going back toward her? His grip was tight. My small legs had to work hard to keep up with his long strides as he moved quickly through the station, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I tried to twist around to look for my mother, but the crowd was a wall of moving bodies. The sound of people talking and the occasional train whistle drowned out the small, panicked voice inside me. We turned down a side corridor I had never noticed before. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal. The man's hand tightened around mine, and my questions tumbled out. "Where's my mama? Are we going to the train?" He didn't answer. His jaw was clenched, eyes darting ahead. At the end of the hallway, a woman was waiting. She was wearing a gray coat, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She looked at me with no warmth at all, just a quick, sharp glance. "We have to move," she said to the man. "Now." They walked fast, pulling me along. My small shoes slipped against the slick floor. My heart began to pound harder, though I still didn't fully understand what was happening. As we approached the main platform, I noticed 2 police officers standing near a ticket booth. The woman's eyes widened. She whispered something urgent to the man. He glanced over his shoulder, and for the first time, I felt his grip loosen. Without a word, they guided me to a wooden bench against the wall and sat me down. "Stay here," the woman said. her voice suddenly softer but still cold. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they turned and melted into the moving crowd. I sat there, confused, staring at the place where they had vanished. My mind raced with questions I didn't have the words to form. I looked around for my mother, expecting her to appear at any moment, smiling and asking why I had wandered off. Instead, another woman approached. She was older, with a heavy coat and a scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She bent down, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, there you are," she said warmly. "Your mama sent me to get you. She's waiting outside." At 4 years old, I had no reason not to believe her. I nodded, slipping my small hand into hers. She led me out of the station and toward a faded blue car parked a short distance away. The door creaked as she opened it, motioning for me to climb inside. I did as I was told, clutching the red lollipop I had managed to grab from the candy stand without even paying. As the car pulled away from the station, I glanced out the window, still expecting to see my mother running after us. The buildings blurred past, and the station disappeared from view. That was the last time I saw the place where my life had been safe. The woman introduced herself as Irene. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant, but her eyes stayed sharp and watchful. She told me I would be staying with her for a while. She didn't say why. She didn't ask about my mother. As the car rolled farther away from the town I knew, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, as if something deep inside me understood that the life I had known was over. Looking back, I realize now that this was the first step into a world where kindness was a lie, and where the next 25 years would be defined by work, silence, and the slow fading of hope. The ride from the train station felt endless. I had no idea where we were going. Irene drove with both hands tight on the wheel, her gaze fixed ahead. Every so often she glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I tried asking about my mother, but she answered only once. "You'll be fine here," she said. Her tone made it clear I shouldn't ask again. After what felt like hours, we pulled onto a narrow dirt road surrounded by trees. The branches hung low, brushing against the car as we moved deeper into the woods. Eventually, a small, weathered house came into view. Its paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the windows were clouded with dirt. The place felt shut off from the rest of the world. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and smoke. Irene led me into the kitchen where an older man sat at the table, a cigarette between his fingers. His hair was thin and gray, his eyes sharp and cold. "This the one?" he asked. Irene nodded. "She'll be useful." From that moment, my life became a routine of work and fear. The man, his name was Walter, rarely spoke to me unless it was to give orders or criticize what I'd done. My first task was sweeping the kitchen floor. I remember gripping the broom, my small hands aching as I tried to push it across the warped boards. I had no idea this was only the beginning. By the time I was 6, my days started before the sun came up. Irene would shake me awake in a small, windowless room where I slept on a thin mattress. Breakfast was a single piece of bread, or nothing at all. Then came the chores. Carrying buckets of water from the pump outside, feeding chickens, scrubbing laundry on a washboard until my fingers were raw. Every time I was too slow or made a mistake, Walter's voice would cut through the air like a whip. Sometimes it wasn't just his voice. The years passed in a blur of labor. I was never allowed to leave the property except on rare trips to the market, always with Irene at my side. She kept a firm grip on my wrist as we walked, her eyes scanning for anyone who might try to talk to me. If I even looked at someone too long, she would squeeze my arm hard enough to leave a mark. There were no friends, no toys, no school. My only companions were the chickens and the stray cats that wandered near the barn. At night, I would lie awake listening to the wind rattle the old window frame, wondering if my mother was still looking for me or if she had given up long ago. When I was about 12, Walter started sending me to chop wood. The axe was heavy, and my arms burned after each swing. One winter morning, I dropped the axe in exhaustion, and he shouted from the porch, "You think we're keeping you for free? Get back to it." His voice carried a threat I knew better than to challenge. I picked the axe back up and kept going until my muscles shook. Despite the constant control, I began to notice cracks in their vigilance. As I got older, they trusted me with more errands. I would walk to the market alone sometimes, though Irene always waited just outside the store. Those brief moments when she wasn't watching felt like the only air I could breathe freely. When I turned 18, they started letting me work odd jobs for neighbors, cleaning barns, mending fences, always taking my pay for themselves. The work was just as hard, but it brought me into contact with people who were kinder, people who asked questions. I didn't answer most of them, but their curiosity planted a seed in me. By the time I was 25, that seed had grown into something I couldn't ignore. I had spent more than 2 decades living as if I belonged to Irene and Walter, but deep down, I knew they weren't my family. I couldn't explain it fully, just a constant sense that my life had been stolen. One summer afternoon, Irene sent me to deliver eggs to a booth at the town's community fair. I remember the music, the smell of grilled food, and the sound of children laughing. I hadn't been around that much life and noise in years. The man at the booth introduced himself as Michael Sanders. He was friendly, with kind eyes, and he asked how I was doing. "Fine," I answered quickly, keeping my voice low. He didn't push, but I could tell he noticed something in me, my nervous glances, the way I kept my shoulders hunched. When I handed him the eggs, he asked, "Do you live around here?" I hesitated. "Sort of." He nodded thoughtfully, then handed me a flyer about a program that reunited missing persons with their families. "If you ever want to talk, call this number," he said. "Even if you think it's too late, it's not." The words stayed with me for weeks. I hid the flyer in my room, pulling it out late at night to read over and over. Finally, one morning when Walter had gone into town and Irene was outside hanging laundry, I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Michael answered. His voice was calm and patient as I told him pieces of my story. I started with the train station, the man's hand, the strange woman, the years of work. I told him I didn't know my real last name. He listened without interrupting, then said, "I believe you. Let me help you find out who you are." That was the first time in 25 years someone had spoken to me as if I mattered, as if my life was worth reclaiming. The call with Michael changed something in me. For years, I had learned to keep my head down, to avoid attracting attention, to accept the life I'd been given. But that single conversation planted a new idea. Maybe the life I'd been given was never mine to begin with. Michael asked if I could meet him somewhere safe. We agreed on the back corner of a small cafe in town, a place where Irene and Walter never went. When I walked in, he was already there with 2 mugs of coffee on the table. He smiled warmly and gestured for me to sit. "I'm glad you came," he said. For the next hour, I told him everything I could remember. I described the day at the train station, the man who had grabbed my hand, the woman who left me on the bench, and Irene appearing as if she had been sent by my mother. I told him about the years of labor, the isolation, the way my questions about my real family were always met with silence or punishment. Michael listened without interrupting. He had a notebook open, jotting down dates, names, and places as I spoke. "Do you know your real birthday?" he asked. "I think I was born in June," I said. "Irene always said it was June 14th, but I don't know if that's true." He leaned forward. "That's enough for a start. There are organizations and online communities that track missing children, even cases decades old. If you're willing, I'd like to share your story publicly. We won't use your current name or where you live, just the details you remember." The idea scared me. Irene and Walter had spent my entire life convincing me the outside world was dangerous. But as I sat across from Michael, I realized that my life had already been dangerous, just in a different way. I nodded. "Do it." Over the next few days, Michael worked on writing my story. He sent me drafts, making sure every detail was accurate. When I approved the final version, he posted it on several social media platforms and in online groups dedicated to finding missing persons. The post included my childhood description, the location and year of the disappearance, and a few memories I had from before I was taken, like the yellow dress with white flowers and my mother's voice promising candy. For the first week, nothing happened. I checked in with Michael almost every day, trying not to let the quiet feel like another locked door. Then, one evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael's name. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. I was standing in the small room I rented above a store in town, my heart pounding. "Yes." A woman named Laura Matthews contacted me. "She says she's your cousin." She read the post and recognized the details, your age, the location, even the dress you described. She told me her aunt's daughter went missing from a train station 25 years ago. That aunt's name is Karen Miller. The name hit me like a wave. It was familiar in a way I couldn't place, like a word on the tip of my tongue. Michael continued, Laura showed your photo to her family. Karen believes you might be her daughter. I sank into the chair. What happens now? The only way to be sure is a DNA test, he said. If you're willing, I'll arrange it. The next week was a blur of arrangements. Michael drove me to a small clinic where a nurse swabbed the inside of my cheek. I felt shaky the whole time, my mind torn between hope and fear. Part of me wanted the results to confirm it so I could finally know who I was. Another part worried it would be a mistake, and I would lose this fragile connection before it began. While we waited, Michael told me more about Laura and her family. Karen had never stopped looking for her daughter. She had worked with police for years, followed every lead, and even traveled to other states chasing rumors. When no answers came, she still marked her daughter's birthday every year, lighting a candle and keeping a framed photo on her dresser. 10 days later, Michael called again. His voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion behind it. The results are in. It's a 99.9% match. Karen and John Miller are your parents. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My hands were shaking as I whispered, so I'm not crazy. I was taken. You were taken, Michael said, and now we can take you home. Laura was the first family member I spoke to. She called the next day, her voice warm and filled with disbelief. Hannah, I've been looking at your picture all morning. You have the same smile as Aunt Karen. She's been waiting for this call for 25 years. The reunion was set for the following weekend. Michael offered to drive me to their home. As we made our way through quiet neighborhoods, my stomach knotted tighter with every turn. When we finally pulled into the driveway of a modest white two-story house, the front door flew open. Karen stood there, her hands covering her mouth. She rushed down the steps before the car had even stopped, tears streaming down her face. I stepped out, and she wrapped her arms around me so tightly I could feel her shaking. My baby, she said over and over, my baby girl. Behind her, a man stepped forward, John Miller, my father. His eyes were wet as he pulled us both into his arms. You're home now, he whispered. Standing there in their driveway, surrounded by people who had waited for me, I realized I was no longer just a story on the internet. I was a daughter, a cousin, a person who belonged somewhere. The hug with my mother felt like something I had been waiting for my entire life without even realizing it. Her arms wrapped around me as if she was afraid that if she let go, I would vanish again. Her voice was trembling but strong, repeating the same words over and over. You're here. You're really here. I didn't know what to say at first. My chest ached from the weight of 25 years without her. I rested my head against her shoulder, letting the warmth of her hold sink in. It felt safe, and that was something I hadn't felt since the day I was taken. John's embrace was different, but just as powerful. He held me firmly, his hand on the back of my head, his voice low. We have so much to catch up on. You've been gone too long. There was no judgment in his tone, no questions about why it had taken this long, just relief. Behind them, I saw Laura standing with a wide smile, her eyes wet with tears. She stepped forward and hugged me like we had known each other our whole lives. I can't believe this is real, she said. I kept telling everyone that post had to be about you. I'm so glad I was right. They invited me inside, and stepping over the threshold felt like crossing into another world. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and clean laundry. The living room was warm with framed photos lining the mantel. I stopped in front of one picture, a younger version of my mother holding a little girl in a yellow dress with white flowers. That's you, Karen said softly, coming up beside me. I took that picture a week before you disappeared. You loved that dress. I kept it all these years. She led me to a small box on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were keepsakes she had saved. Tiny shoes, a worn teddy bear, a handful of drawings I didn't remember making. I touched the teddy bear, my fingers brushing over the faded fabric. You kept all this. Of course, she said. I never stopped believing I'd see you again. We sat down together, and for the next hour they told me everything that had happened after I was taken. Karen described the panic at the train station, the desperate search through the crowd, the hours at the police station, giving every detail she could remember. John had joined the search as soon as they met years later. They followed every lead, even the ones that didn't make sense. There were nights when Karen drove to nearby towns just to look at the faces of strangers, hoping one of them would be mine. Listening to them, I realized that while I had been living in isolation, they had been living in a different kind of prison, the prison of not knowing. Every birthday that passed, every holiday, they had wondered if I was alive. Then it was my turn to talk. I told them about Irene and Walter, about the endless work and the punishments. I told them how I had convinced myself that no one was looking for me, because believing otherwise would have hurt too much. My voice shook when I described meeting Michael and how he had given me hope for the first time. Karen reached across the table and took my hand. "You never stopped being my daughter. I never stopped loving you." John added quietly, "We can't get those years back, but we can make the rest of them count." The conversation shifted to the present. They wanted me to stay with them for as long as I needed. They showed me the guest room they had prepared, the walls painted in a soft blue. "We thought you might like this color," Karen said. "It reminded me of the sky on the day you were born." That night, we had dinner together. Laura stayed, and so did Ethan, my younger half-brother. He was curious but shy at first, stealing glances at me from across the table. Eventually, he asked, "What's your favorite ice cream?" I smiled. "Chocolate chip cookie dough." His face lit up. "Mine too." It was such a small moment, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't the girl trapped in someone else's house. I was part of a family. After dinner, we sat in the living room, flipping through old photo albums. Karen showed me pictures of the birthdays I had missed, the family trips they had taken, the life that had gone on without me. Each image was a reminder of what I had lost, but also of what I had finally found again. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the guest room. The bed was soft. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, and the window looked out over the quiet street. I thought about the years I had spent sleeping in that small, windowless room at Irene's house. I thought about all the times I had wondered if I would ever see my real family again. Now I was here. I belonged here. In the days that followed, the news of my return spread through the extended family. Relatives I had never met sent letters and messages, welcoming me home. Michael visited to see how I was adjusting, and when Karen hugged him, she thanked him for bringing her daughter back. One afternoon, Laura pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "your story is going to help other people. There are so many families still waiting, just like ours was. You can give them hope." She was right. I didn't survive those 25 years just to stay silent. I began speaking with Michael about sharing my experience publicly, not just to tell my story, but to help others find their missing loved ones. The moment that defined it all came one evening when Karen and I were sitting on the porch. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She turned to me, her eyes bright but steady. "You're home, Hannah. No one is ever going to take you away from me again." I leaned against her shoulder, feeling the truth in her words. For the first time in my life, I believed it. The days after my reunion felt like waking up in a different world. The rhythm of my life changed completely. There was no morning knock on the door demanding I get to work, no endless list of chores waiting before sunrise. Instead, I woke to the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen and the sound of my mother humming softly as she prepared breakfast. Karen seemed determined to fill the gaps in my life that had been left empty for 25 years. She took me to places she thought I might enjoy. A local bookstore, the park where she used to take me as a toddler, the diner where she and Uncle David would meet for lunch. Each outing felt like discovering a piece of myself I had never known. John quietly took on the role of protector. He helped me get identification documents, something I had never owned under my real name. He drove me to appointments, taught me how to navigate the bank, and made sure I knew that I had a place in their home for as long as I wanted it. Ethan, my younger brother, grew bolder each day. He would knock on my door asking if I wanted to watch a movie or play board games. One night, we stayed up late eating popcorn and laughing over a comedy film. I realized how much I had missed simple moments like that, moments where I could just exist without fear. Healing was not instant. There were nights when I woke from dreams of the dark, windowless room I had slept in for years. Some days I struggled to believe that Irene and Walter could no longer control me, but each time the doubt crept in, Karen or John would be there to remind me that I was home. Michael continued to visit, checking in to see how I was adjusting. He encouraged me to share my story publicly, not just for myself, but for other families still searching. At first, the idea made me nervous, but the more I thought about it, the more I understood that my survival could give hope to people who felt hopeless. With Michael's help, I agreed to speak at a community event about missing persons. Standing on that stage, looking out at a crowd of parents, siblings, and friends holding photos of their loved ones, I told them about the day I was taken, the years of hard labor, and the moment Michael's post connected me to my family. I told them that even when I thought no one was looking for me, my mother never stopped searching. The response was overwhelming. People came up to thank me, some in tears, saying my story gave them courage to keep looking. That was when I knew I was ready to turn my pain into purpose. Life slowly began to settle into something steady. I took a part-time job at the library, a quiet space where I could rebuild my confidence while being surrounded by kind people. I started learning to cook with Karen, who taught me family recipes passed down from her mother. We would stand side by side at the counter, chopping vegetables and sharing stories about her childhood and mine. The biggest change was learning what it meant to be part of a family again. Holidays were no longer just another day of work. On Thanksgiving, the house was full of relatives, laughter, and the smell of roasting turkey. At Christmas, Karen hung a stocking with my name on it for the first time in 25 years. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, Karen turned to me and said, "I used to sit here and wonder where you were, if you were safe, if you were warm enough. Now I know you're here, and that's all that matters." Those words stayed with me. They reminded me that no matter how many years had been taken, the love of a family can bridge even the longest separation. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to know that hope is never wasted. If someone you love is missing, keep searching. One connection, one shared story can change everything. And if you have lived through something like this yourself, know that you are not alone and that it is never too late to find your way back. What are your thoughts on this story? If you or someone you know has faced something similar, share it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it so others can hear it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this.